His growl was barely a whisper, but it froze the room. The other dogs fell silent, ears twitching in the dim light of the shelter's back room. Dust clung to the cracked tiles. Fluorescent lights flickered above, humming like a broken lullaby. In kennel number 14, a battered German shepherd lay curled in the corner, his ribs like shadows against his golden black fur. His name was Maverick, or at least that's what the faded tag around his neck claimed. He didn't bark anymore, not after the last time. 2 nights ago, Marcus, the overnight worker, stormed in drunk again. The barking set him off. A slap echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Maverick hadn't made a sound since. But tonight, something shifted. The air was thick with tension. Marcus stumbled down the hallway, cursing under his breath, keys jangling. He swung the door open and kicked Maverick's bowl across the floor. Water spilled. The shepherd didn't flinch, just stared, eyes like steel, still, silent, watching. That stare too intelligent, too calm, like he was calculating. Marcus reached down to grab his collar. "Move, mutt," he snapped. That's when it happened. The shepherd rose, not with rage, but with purpose. Smooth, controlled. He sidestepped Marcus's hand and walked right past him. The door was ajar, wide enough. The camera above blinked red. Maverick paused, looked straight up at it, then disappeared into the dark. A silent alarm tripped. Shelter staff arrived the next morning, baffled. His kennel? Empty. No signs of forced exit. No paw prints. No broken locks. Gone. Except for one thing. Taped to the camera screen was a Polaroid, a picture of Maverick outside next to a child in a wheelchair. And scribbled below, in childlike handwriting, "Thank you for finding me." But who was the child? How did Maverick escape? And most of all, was he even just a dog? Something in his eyes had said otherwise, and someone was about to uncover the truth. The night was thick with the hum of the city, distant traffic sounds barely breaking through the silence of the empty streets. A soft wind stirred the leaves, creating a ghostly dance around the cracked sidewalk. The shelter stood alone, tucked away behind an old iron gate, its peeling sign barely visible in the dim light of the street lamp. Inside, the air was heavy, stale, cold, and filled with the faint echo of dogs who had long since given up hope. Maverick lay curled in the corner of his kennel, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, watching the shadows stretch across the room. There was a peculiar stillness about him tonight, an unsettling calm that contrasted with the frantic energy of the others who paced restlessly in their cages. His coat was matted, dirty from the weeks of neglect, but his gaze, sharp, intelligent, spoke volumes. He could hear every footstep echoing down the hallway, the shuffle of Marcus's boots growing louder. He could feel the vibrations in the floor as the door creaked open. But Maverick didn't flinch. He didn't even move. His body, worn and battered from countless days of abuse, had learned the art of stillness. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Something that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The faintest hint of hope, like the softest breeze breaking through the suffocating walls of the shelter. Marcus appeared at the doorway, swaying, a bottle in his hand. His eyes were bleary, unfocused. He stumbled towards Maverick's kennel, his shadow falling over the dog like a dark cloud. Maverick remained still, watching him with a sense of knowing. He could feel it, the change, the shift, the moment where things would finally take a turn. There was something about tonight, something that would change everything. The door was slightly ajar, and in the distance, just beyond the gates, there was a glimmer of light, a beacon of something better. Maverick's ears twitched. Something was coming, something good. It was his moment. Elena had always known she was meant to care for animals. As a veterinary student, she spent hours poring over textbooks, learning about anatomy, treatments, and the intricacies of animal behavior. But nothing in her studies could prepare her for the emotional toll it would take. She had seen pets abandoned at shelters, hearts broken by neglect, and yet, nothing struck her as deeply as Maverick's story. The moment she saw him, she knew he wasn't just any dog. There was a history in his eyes, one that was hidden under layers of mistrust and fear. She had heard the rumors. Maverick had once been a police K9, fiercely loyal to his handler, a dog trained to protect and serve. But something had gone terribly wrong. Maverick had been found wandering the streets months ago, injured and malnourished, with no sign of his handler. No one knew what happened to him, and the shelter staff didn't seem to care enough to find out. To them, Maverick was just another unwanted dog, a casualty of time. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story. She would visit him every day, offering food and quiet company. Maverick never reacted like the other dogs. He was quiet, withdrawn, and had an air of quiet dignity about him. It was as if he knew something she didn't. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were clouded with something deeper. Something that made Elena wonder if he would ever trust again. Her heart broke for him. There were days when Maverick would approach the bars of his cage, his tail wagging just a little, as though testing her sincerity. She'd reach out a hand, and for a fleeting moment, his nose would touch her fingertips. But then, just as quickly, he would pull back, retreating into the shadows. Elena often wondered if he remembered what it felt like to be loved, if he even remembered how to trust. The truth was, she wasn't sure if she could reach him, but she was determined to try. Every day she returned, hoping that somehow, someway, Maverick would remember who he was. She didn't know it yet, but tonight would be different. As the moon rose higher, casting a silver glow over the shelter, Elena couldn't help but feel the stirrings of hope deep within her chest. Something was about to change, and she could feel it in her bones. Maverick was about to show her a side of him she never thought possible. The shelter had always been a quiet place at night, a haunting stillness hanging in the air. The hum of fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with a low, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Elena had grown accustomed to it. But tonight, something felt different. She couldn't shake the sense of unease that crept along her spine. Maverick was restless. He hadn't slept the whole night, pacing back and forth in his kennel, eyes wide, ears alert. His gaze never left the door, as though he was waiting for something or someone. Elena tried to brush off the feeling. She had grown used to Maverick's moods, and tonight was no exception. She figured it was just another one of his restless episodes, a product of his troubled past. But as she approached his cage, something shifted. Maverick's eyes locked onto hers, intense and piercing. The usual wariness was gone, replaced by a fierce, almost desperate energy. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she felt the weight of his stare. There was a message in those eyes, something unspoken. It was as if Maverick was telling her that something was coming, something that could change everything. The door to the shelter creaked open, breaking the silence, and Elena jumped. She spun around to see Jenny, the shelter volunteer coordinator, standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, and her usual cheerful demeanor was gone. "Elena," she said in a low voice, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I need to talk to you. It's about Maverick." Elena's stomach tightened as she followed Jenny into the back office, away from the rest of the shelter. The air felt colder here, the shadows seeming to stretch longer. Jenny closed the door behind them and spoke in a whisper. "You're not going to like this, Elena. We've had some complaints about Maverick from some of the other staff." Elena's brow furrowed. "Complaints? What do you mean?" Jenny hesitated before speaking again. "There's a rumor going around that Maverick wasn't just abandoned. He was part of something bigger, a criminal operation, something to do with the police force." Elena felt her heart race. "That's ridiculous. Maverick's a police dog. He was trained to protect and serve. He would never—" "I know," Jenny interrupted, her voice shaking. "But you need to understand, there are things we don't know about him. We're getting pressure to put him down. People think he's dangerous." Elena's hands clenched into fists. Dangerous? Maverick. Her mind raced. She had seen Maverick's gentleness, his loyalty. But now, in the face of this new information, she realized there was so much more she didn't know. Maverick's past, his connection to the police force, the real reason he had been abandoned. Everything was shrouded in mystery. "What are you going to do?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Jenny replied, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But I had to tell you. He trusts you, Elena, and you're the only one who can figure out the truth." The truth. Elena had always suspected there was something more to Maverick's story. But this was a revelation. She needed answers, not just for Maverick, but for herself. She had to know who he was before it was too late. The next morning, Elena arrived at the shelter early, her mind racing with questions. She had to start somewhere. Maverick's training as a K-9 officer had to be documented. She began digging through the records, sifting through files on past police dogs. The more she read, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Fragments of Maverick's past were hidden in plain sight. He had been an exceptional dog, highly trained, a key part of a tactical police unit. But then the records became blurry. There were no details about why he had been removed from duty, no mention of his handler, nothing about the circumstances of his disappearance. Elena's frustration mounted. She needed to know what had happened to Maverick. She couldn't let him slip through her fingers, not when there was so much at stake. She reached out to the police department, but the response was cold, dismissive. "Sorry, we don't have any records on that dog," the officer on the other end of the line said. "He's no longer in service. That's all you need to know." That wasn't enough. Elena wasn't going to give up. She visited the local police station, hoping to speak to someone who might remember Maverick, someone who could shed light on the mystery. She was directed to an older officer named Jason Reeves, a retired K-9 handler who had once worked with Maverick. He was hesitant at first, reluctant to talk about his old partner, but after some coaxing, he finally relented. "I don't know much about what happened to Maverick after I was reassigned," Officer Reeves said, his voice low. "But I do know that something went wrong. He was a great dog, loyal to the end. But after the incident, he wasn't the same. We were working a high-risk mission, and he just disappeared. We searched for him for days, but he was gone. I thought I lost him forever." Elena's heart sank. What happened? What kind of mission was it? Officer Reeves paused, looking over his shoulder as though checking to make sure no one was listening. "I can't say much, but there were people involved, people who didn't want Maverick to survive. He was too good, too skilled. They didn't want him to be a witness. That's why they took him." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The pieces were falling into place now. Maverick had been part of something far darker than she had imagined. His abandonment, his pain, it was all part of a much bigger story. One that wasn't over yet. She returned to the shelter that evening, her mind swirling with new information. Maverick's past was darker than she had ever thought. But there was hope. She wasn't going to let him face this alone. As she stepped into the shelter, something caught her eye. A shadow moving in the corner of the yard. It wasn't human. Maverick's ears perked up, and his body tensed, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Something was coming, and Elena wasn't ready for what was about to unfold. But one thing was clear. She had to act fast. The shadow grew closer, and Maverick's eyes never left it. His body seemed to vibrate with anticipation, his instincts screaming that danger was near. Elena's pulse quickened as she glanced around. She had no idea what she was about to face, but she knew one thing for sure. Maverick was more than just a survivor. He was a fighter, and together they would face whatever came next. The shadow in the yard wasn't just a figment of her imagination. Elena's heart pounded as she watched the dark shape move toward them. It wasn't human. Maverick's low growl vibrated through the quiet air, a warning that only he seemed to understand. His muscles tensed, ready for whatever threat was near. Elena stepped back, her mind racing. She had come prepared for many things, but this was new. Maverick, the dog she had grown to trust, had never reacted like this before. The figure emerged from the darkness, a man, or what seemed like one at first. But his movements were erratic, jerking as if he weren't entirely in control of himself. Elena froze, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. The figure approached with slow, deliberate steps, each one heavier than the last. Maverick's growl grew deeper, a warning growl that echoed through the stillness. Elena's breath caught in her throat, her hand trembling as she reached for the cell phone in her pocket. She needed to call for backup. But before she could dial, the figure stopped. And then, to Elena's shock, it spoke. "Don't be afraid." The voice was shaky, almost pleading. "I'm not here to hurt you." Elena stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. "What do you want?" The man shifted uneasily, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "My name is Thomas. I'm here to warn you about Maverick." Her heart sank. She had heard that name before, that same warning, but never from someone like him. Maverick had been a part of something much larger than she realized, and she had been too naive to understand it until now. "Warn me," Elena repeated, trying to stay calm, but her voice shook with fear. "Why? What are you talking about?" Thomas took a step closer, his eyes darting nervously to Maverick. "It's not safe for you here," he said, his words hurried. "They'll be coming for him, for both of you. There's no escaping it. You're both marked." The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating the space between them. Elena's mind raced as she struggled to process what Thomas was saying. Maverick was marked? Who was coming for them? And why? Before she could respond, the silence was broken by a sound. A sharp, sudden noise coming from the woods beyond the shelter. A rustling, footsteps, heavy ones drawing closer. Elena's heart dropped into her stomach. She didn't need to look at Maverick to know he was already on high alert. His body was rigid, eyes fixed on the woods. His stance told her everything she needed to know. Danger was near. Thomas stepped back, his hands trembling. "They're here," he whispered. "You need to leave. Now." A chill ran down Elena's spine as she glanced around, her mind spinning. She had no idea who they were, but she could feel the danger in the air. Her instincts screamed at her to run. She grabbed Maverick's leash, pulling him closer, but her eyes never left the woods. She had no time to waste. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. A figure emerged from the trees, stepping into the dim light of the shelter yard. This time, Elena could see him clearly. It was a man, tall, with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. He wore dark clothing, a jacket that looked too expensive for a typical person. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," the man said, his voice smooth and threatening. "You should have left him alone." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Maverick growled again, stepping in front of her protectively. Elena's grip on his leash tightened. She wasn't going anywhere without him. "I don't know who you are, but you're not taking him," Elena said, her voice trembling but firm. The man smiled, a cruel twist of his lips that made Elena's skin crawl. "You think you can protect him?" The man's gaze flicked over to Thomas, who stood frozen in place, watching the confrontation with wide eyes. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Neither of you do." "Who are you?" Elena demanded, feeling a surge of anger and fear. She wasn't going to back down now. Not with Maverick so close. Not with him depending on her. The man chuckled darkly. "You're in over your head. You have no idea what Maverick really is. But you'll find out soon enough." He raised a hand, signaling behind him. "It's already too late." Before Elena could react, she saw movement in the trees. More figures, emerging like shadows from the darkness. They were closing in from all sides. The forest had come alive with their presence. Maverick's growl intensified, and Elena took a step back, her heart pounding. She looked to Thomas, but he was already backing away, fear evident in his eyes. "You don't know what you're up against," he repeated, shaking his head. "You need to leave, Elena. It's the only way you'll survive." But Elena didn't move. She couldn't. She wouldn't leave Maverick. Not now, not when she had finally uncovered the truth. Maverick's bark cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she saw him lunge forward, pulling the leash from her hand and charging toward the strangers. His powerful frame cut through the air with purpose, his eyes narrowed and fierce. The man's smile faltered for a moment as he watched Maverick charge at them. Elena could see it in his eyes. Surprise, fear, hesitation. He wasn't expecting Maverick to react this way. But it wasn't just the dog's strength that gave him pause. There was something else, something primal, something dangerous in the way Maverick moved. The figures in the woods hesitated, unsure of what to do. They weren't prepared for Maverick's sudden aggression. But as Elena watched the tension mount, her mind raced. She had no choice now. She couldn't just wait for this to play out. With one swift motion, Elena grabbed Maverick's leash again, pulling him back just as he was about to launch into a full attack. Her heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline coursing through her veins, as she dragged him away from the men who were now slowly advancing, taking another step closer. For a brief moment, the danger seemed to fade. The men were hesitant, watching Maverick warily, unsure of how to proceed. But Elena knew that this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The stakes had just risen, and everything was about to change. In that moment, the sound of police sirens filled the air, and Elena's eyes widened in shock. But the relief didn't last long. The figures in the woods had already disappeared into the night, slipping away as quickly as they had come. Elena stood there, breathless, Maverick by her side, unsure of what had just happened but knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Elena's heart raced as she stood there, Maverick at her side, her hand gripping the leash with trembling fingers. The police sirens had faded, but the tension in the air remained thick, like a storm waiting to break. She could still feel the presence of the figures lurking in the woods, just beyond the reach of the dim light, watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But that moment never came. Instead, there was a crackling in the distance, the unmistakable sound of a vehicle crunching over the gravel road. "Stay close," Elena whispered to Maverick, who, though panting, was alert, his eyes scanning the darkness. The sound of approaching cars grew louder, the engine growling as it cut through the quiet night. Elena had no idea what was going on, but something told her it wasn't over. A flash of headlights cut through the trees, illuminating the yard for a brief moment. Elena squinted, recognizing the black SUV pulling to a halt at the edge of the property. Her pulse quickened, her instincts telling her that the answers she had been searching for were within reach. Finally, the vehicle came to a stop, and the doors swung open. Two figures stepped out. One was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a stern look in his eyes. The other was a woman, much smaller, but with an air of quiet authority. They didn't say a word as they approached Elena, their expressions unreadable. For a brief moment, Elena thought of running, but Maverick, standing tall beside her, gave a sharp bark, as if to say, "No, we face this together." "Who are you?" Elena demanded, her voice firm but filled with curiosity and concern. "And what do you know about Maverick?" The man's gaze flicked over Maverick, then back to Elena. "I'm Agent Collins," he said, his voice low but resolute. "This is Dr. Morgan." He gestured to the woman beside him, who nodded briefly. "We've been tracking Maverick for months," Dr. Morgan added, her voice soft but steady. "What he's been through, what he's part of, it's bigger than both of us. But we're here to help." Elena's stomach twisted with confusion. "Help? He's been through hell in that shelter. And now you're telling me it's all part of something bigger." Agent Collins nodded, his expression grave. "Maverick is no ordinary dog. He's been trained for a special operation. An operation that got out of hand. And now there's a group that wants him back. Wants him silenced." Elena's blood ran cold. "So, they're the ones who've been after us all along. The people in the woods." "Not exactly," Dr. Morgan interjected. "Those people were part of a larger organization. They were the ones who took Maverick in the first place. But we're not your enemies. We've been trying to bring down that organization for months. Maverick's freedom is key to stopping them." Elena took a deep breath, trying to process everything. Her mind raced with questions, but one thing stood out above all. Maverick had been special from the start. He wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier, a weapon, but more than that, he had been forced into a role he didn't deserve. "Is he safe now?" Elena asked, her voice quiet but desperate. For a moment, the silence between them felt suffocating. Then, to her relief, Agent Collins spoke. "For now, yes," he said, his tone softening. "But this isn't over. They won't stop looking for him. They want Maverick back, no matter the cost." Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving Maverick, who was now sitting at her feet. His eyes trained on her with an intensity that spoke volumes. He had been through so much already, more than any dog should ever endure. And yet, here he was, standing by her side, loyal and unwavering. "We'll protect him," Elena said, her voice resolute. "Whatever it takes." Dr. Morgan's eyes softened as she looked at the bond between Elena and Maverick. "We'll help you," she said, her voice gentle. "You're not alone in this." But even as she spoke, Elena's mind was already racing ahead, calculating her next move. This wasn't just about Maverick anymore. This was about justice, about protecting him and bringing down the people who had tried to use him for their own purposes. A sudden noise from the trees interrupted her thoughts. A flash of movement, a shadow darting between the trees. Elena's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest. Maverick's ears perked up, his body stiffening, ready for whatever danger approached. The figure emerged from the trees, but this time, it wasn't one of the men from before. Instead, it was a familiar face, the face of Officer Jason Reeves, Maverick's former handler. He was bruised, battered, but alive. "Maverick!" Jason's voice broke through the tension like a lifeline, and Maverick's tail began to wag. Elena's heart soared with relief. Jason knelt down, reaching out for Maverick, who bounded toward him, barking with excitement. The reunion was swift and emotional, a flood of joy that seemed to fill the yard. Jason's hands shook as he stroked Maverick's fur, tears in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost you forever, boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Elena watched the scene unfold, a sense of peace settling over her as she realized that, despite everything, Maverick had found his way home. He was safe, finally, and he was with the person who had loved him first. "I'm sorry," Jason said, looking up at Elena. "I should have never let him go. I'll make sure he's protected from now on. He's not just a dog, he's family." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I think he's found his family here, too." As the tension in the air slowly lifted, Elena stood beside Jason, watching as Maverick and Jason shared a quiet moment together. The bond between them was undeniable, stronger than anything she had ever witnessed. It was a bond forged in loyalty, in trust, in shared history, and it was unbreakable. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elena felt a sense of calm. The danger had passed, and the mystery had been solved. Maverick, the brave and loyal German shepherd who had fought against everything that tried to break him, was finally free. And with that freedom came hope, a hope for a future where he would be loved and protected, a future that belonged to him. Maverick bounded back to Elena, tail wagging furiously, his eyes bright with excitement. He nuzzled her hand, and she couldn't help but laugh as she bent down to pet him. "You did it, boy," she whispered, her voice full of warmth. "You're home." And just like that, the storm inside her heart settled. The future was uncertain, but in this moment, Elena knew one thing for sure. Maverick was safe, and they were together. The two of them, Maverick and Elena, had overcome the impossible. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. Elena stood in the quiet yard, her eyes softening as she watched Maverick chase after a fallen leaf, his tail wagging with the joy of pure freedom. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the land. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world seemed at peace. No more fear, no more lurking shadows. Just the sound of the wind and the contented bark of a dog who had found his place in the world. Maverick ran toward her, his paws light against the earth, a picture of happiness. Elena knelt down, her heart full as she watched him approach, his eyes shining with affection. He had been through so much, betrayal, pain, and loss. But now there was only love. He was safe. He was home. She smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "You did it, boy," she whispered as Maverick nudged his head into her hands, seeking affection. She had saved him, but in doing so, he had saved her. They had both healed, both found a new beginning in each other's presence. The bond they shared was unspoken, but it was there, stronger than anything else in the world. As they stood together, Elena felt a sense of gratitude and calm that she hadn't known in years. She had walked through darkness and emerged into the light, not alone, but with Maverick by her side. It wasn't just a dog. He was her partner, her protector, her family. They had found each other, and that was enough. In this moment, Elena knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. No matter the challenges, no matter the unknown, there was a deep, unwavering truth that lived between them. Love, hope, and a bond that could never be broken. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena and Maverick walked into the future side by side, ready for whatever came next, with nothing but love to guide them. What would you do if you found yourself in Elena's shoes? Would you have had the courage to follow Maverick's tracks, not knowing where they'd lead? Would you have been able to offer him the second chance he deserved? Let us know in the comments below, because we know the bond between a dog and their human is unlike anything else, and we'd love to hear how you've experienced that in your own life. If Maverick's journey touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and share this story with your friends. There's no better feeling than spreading a little love and hope. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. You won't want to miss what's coming next. And trust us, there's plenty more where this came from. Together, we're building a community of people who believe in the power of love, loyalty, and second chances. So, if you think this story deserves to be heard more, share it far and wide. You never know whose heart might need that extra bit of hope. Remember, when you share, you're giving the world a little more kindness, one story at a time. Stay tuned, stay hopeful, and let's keep the love growing, one paw print at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and join the pack.